Hey, welcome again to another CheapWineFinder.com podcast, a companion podcast for a wine that we wrote up on the CheapWineFinder.com website like we always do and have for over a decade. And we're now looking a little bit at Easter, what to pair. And try to go a little bit out of the box, not too much. And we have the Jadot Beaujolais-Villages 2020. You might know it better as Louis Jadot, which is how I used to spell it until I pushed the button on their website and they pronounced the name for Jadot. So it's a Beaujolais-Villages, and I think I bought this at Trader Joe's, but if I'm not mistaken, it's probably more expensive there than anywhere else. I think I paid $12 for it, and this is a wine you should get between $10 and $12 for the most part. And Beaujolais is the southern part of Burgundy. Champagne's the north part of Burgundy. Both Champagne and Burgundy primarily are Pinot Noir Chardonnay with, other grapes thrown in. I'm going to take a sip of this one. And down in Beaujolais, it's Gamay. Now, Gamay is a grape that will remind you of, depending on how it's made. I'm pouring myself some more. It will remind you of Pinot Noir. I mean, it can be a little bit more fresh fruit, a little bit more fruit forward than Pinot Noir, but it has a lot of the same flavors. And let's see what else is there. There's like 96 different villages. In France, everything revolves around what village it is. And there's 96 villages that grow grapes that can be approved for an AOC Beaujolais wine. And there's 38 villages that are approved for villages wines. And then there's 10, and that's part of the 38, I think, cru villages, which are the upper end. And those wines you'll see on the label, it will have a village name on there, not just straight Beaujolais or Beaujolais-Villages. And the one thing about Louis Jadot is that all 10 of the cru villages have grapes in this wine, this inexpensive wine. Though the crus usually aren't super expensive, but they put the good stuff in here. I'm going to take another sip. Typically, today, a lot of Beaujolais wines are modern wines, and they're made with carbonic maceration, which is, and I'll try to explain it because I've never seen it myself, so I read about it, so I might not have it exactly right, but you can Google it yourself too. They take the whole cluster of grapes, and they put them in a vat, a large vat, and the grapes on the bottom get crushed, but the other grapes all stay whole. And they put it in a very carbon dioxide-rich environment, which causes the grapes to ferment. And we're talking about a large operation here. And then when the grapes fully ferment in the skins, that's when they crush them, as opposed to traditional fermentation, which this wine is traditional. The only traditional fermentation, they crush the grapes, then they add yeast and ferment it. The only thing they did new here, or not the only thing, but the main thing is they cold soak the grapes. So when you start fermentation, the grapes are already cold. And that brings out different color in the wine and different flavor chemicals when you go through fermentation. So this is going to be a kind of a traditional Beaujolais, but with a couple of new tricks thrown in. Just took a sip. Now, Louis Jadot has been around since 1859. They started out as negociants. Negociants go to wineries and, the grape have different yields every year. So you can very easily have excess wine, and they would buy the excess wine from them, maybe put a new label on it, maybe take someone else's wine and add them together. If the other wine is aged for 2 years, they do this for 6 months, and then they put their label on it and sell it for a much less expensive price. And you never know who the first winery is, And you have to trust the negociant. Their reputation is everything. And today they actually have their own vineyards and make their own wines too. But if you're a negociant for 160 years plus, yeah, you probably have a good reputation. So think about this as a Easter wine if you're doing ham. It has maybe a little bit more fruit-forward flavors than a traditional California Pinot Noir, because that's what normally gets recommended. You want a light red wine, and for value-priced wine drinkers, that's kind of the one. There are, light red wines from different places from more obscure grapes, but if you're looking for value, you're talking Beaujolais-Villages or California Pinot Noir. Otherwise it gets expensive in a hurry. So that's what we're doing. We're looking to get good for cheap. Let's take another sip because this is really starting to appeal to me. And it will go very well. I mean, it's more medium than light bodied, but it's got the cherry flavors, which would usually go with ham and that type of thing. And it would go with, hard-boiled eggs, if you're coloring eggs, or deviled eggs. And it would go a lot of different dishes you'd have in the spring. It wouldn't overpower. Since it's French, it actually is a food wine, and that's what the French do. They drink their wine with food. But it also sips well. I mean, this is one of those double duty wines. An American wine will be a food wine too, but it's almost always, especially in the value price, a sipper first, food wine second. And this one kind of does both, which is a good thing, especially for 10 to 12 bucks for a wine. And Louis Jadot says they're the number one French wine company in the United States. I can see why. It's a value wine. So that's it for me, Domain Dave. Like us where you like your podcasts, and I'm going to take another sip. We have more Easter things coming up. I think I've got what do I have? A rosé, another one from France, because if you're looking for food wines, that's where you want to look at, especially for Easter. And the Italian wines will do the same thing too, but we'll see when we get there. So adios, keep it cheap, stay cool and warm because the weather's crazy, and I'll be talking to everybody in a couple of days. Adios, bye-bye. Keep it cheap.